Hello, everyone. My name is Emily with Rising Stars Football Academy, and welcome back to another installment of Hashtag Feature Friday, a segment dedicated to featuring different student athletes and coaches and their experiences with our camps and combines. Now, today I am joined by JD Granger. Coach Granger has been with the Redline football team since 2002. He has been the linebacker coach throughout his tenure, and since 2011 has been the defensive coordinator. He played his collegiate football at East Stroudsburg University from the years 1996 to 1999 and excelled at the linebacker position. We appreciate him taking the time to speak with us today. So thanks for joining me, JD. How's it going?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. So I'd like to start off and talk a little bit about your sports background and what you played growing up. So what were the kinds of sports that you played growing up? And was football always your number one?
I played a ton of sports growing up, a lot of basketball. My dad was a head basketball coach for a long time at Southwestern High School. And so I grew up playing basketball. He was also a tennis coach. So I played some tennis, played baseball, ran track and field in high school. Growing up in my neighborhood, we were outside doing stuff all the time, playing baseball, playing wiffle ball. Heck, we would set up a boxing ring and we'd box each other in the backyard. So I played a ton of sports, but as soon as I could play football, I fell in love with it. I was probably actually a better basketball player, but it was just something that I fell in love with right away.
And do you think that those sports help to improve your overall football abilities? Like, how were the transitions going from season to season or sport to sport?
As a linebacker, one of the things that you need to be able to do well is move well laterally. You do a lot of that when you play basketball. What we did in high school, a lot of us ran track. I was a thrower, but we did track so that we could get faster. I think a lot of the sports that I played growing up kind of molded me into the football player that I developed into.
Yeah, and I know your football team was pretty dominant back in the day. So can you talk a little bit about some of those athletic achievements in high school?
Playing football at Southwestern in the 90s was pretty special. Aside from my own father, Coach Simon Stricker, and my college football coach, Denny Dowds, these are guys that were huge mentors to me. Just being able to be a part of that program at Southwestern in the 90s is something that I will take with me forever. The bond that we all share, the guys that were ahead of me, the guys that were behind me, it was just a pretty good run of talent, but also just the way that the program was run. We wanted to be out there on the field on a Friday night, and we were okay with waiting our turn as well. We won a league championship my sophomore year. We went undefeated my junior year. Played a little special teams my junior year, but I didn't really get to play until I was a senior. The guys that were ahead of me, they were a little bit physically ahead of us. A lot of the guys that I graduated with, we didn't get to play until we were seniors. But I also think that's the sign of a really good program. You should be a senior heavy team if you expect to do well.
And going into maybe your junior or your senior season, like you said, and you kind of have an idea of maybe I want to pursue this at the next level. Can you talk a little bit about that recruitment process and what schools you were looking at to play at that next level?
Well, for me anyway, it's a lot different than a lot of kids their experience today. I had no idea that I was going to play college football. I held those guys that were ahead of me that were able to go on and play at East Stroudsburg or play at Shippensburg or play at Bloomsburg. A couple guys, they were able to maybe go to William and Mary and Rutgers, and Josh Redding, who was a teammate of mine in my grade, went to Virginia Tech and had a great collegiate career there. But for me, the thought of me playing in college never really crossed my mind. And it wasn't even anything that like my parents and I talked about. It wasn't until I got pulled out of class after my senior year, they were saying, hey, there's some people here, they're recruiting you. And I'm like, oh, okay. I was actually already accepted to Penn State and Old Dominion, and I was kind of choosing between those two schools. And then I started to get recruited, and I'm like, oh, this would be fun. Maybe I'll try to keep playing football for a little bit longer.
And how did you eventually decide on ESU? Like, what was it about the program or the coaching staff that ultimately felt like that was the right choice for you?
Coach Mike Twilliger is the coach from East Stroudsburg that recruits our area. He came to Southwestern, and I just fell in love with him. And so I took a visit to East Stroudsburg and fell in love with the Poconos. If you're an outdoorsy person, there's no better place to be in Pennsylvania than outside of East Stroudsburg in the Pocono Mountains. But also I really fell in love with Coach Denny Dowds. When you talk about a man who is a mentor and has been a mentor to so many young men who have gone off to coach football. There are a ton of head high school football coaches that are East Stroudsburg alums. Everybody knows the guy that is coaching the Nittany Lions. James Franklin is an East Stroudsburg alum. But there are a ton of coaches like myself who are assistants and doing a really good job and just carrying on a lot of the lessons that Coach Dowds gave to us. His legacy at East Stroudsburg is unmeasurable.
What was the biggest challenge or maybe unexpected aspect of playing football at that next level?
Well, for me, I was a little undersized. I think I was like 195 when I weighed in as a freshman. I doubt East Stroudsburg has any freshman linebackers that are 195 right now. That work ethic that we developed, the competition that was there in high school to get onto the field, that was something that was instilled in me. It was just second nature when I got to college. I knew that it was going to be an uphill battle for me to get on the field. Luckily for me, I really enjoyed the contact through hard work, determination, being able to be coached well. I actually was able to see the field a little bit as a freshman. And then as a sophomore, saw a little bit of time, started a few games towards the end of my sophomore year, and then started every game my junior and senior year. But the challenges going in for me, obviously, just size. I also think coming from a system that we ran in high school, the wing T, it's a little bit different than other high schools. And so the football terminology was something that I struggled with a little bit. As a freshman, I didn't even know what pro was. In high school, it was all numbers. And I think every college football player has that a little bit. There's a lot of eye-opening things as far as speed and strength and just pure knowledge of the game. And you just got to dive into it and soak it all in as quickly as you can. Luckily, I was able to get onto the field a little bit in special teams and play some football as a freshman.
And how were you able to balance your academic schedule with your football schedule? Were there any maybe resources available to you to help you keep on the right track with your academics?
I've always done well academically, done fairly well in high school. And then in college, for me personally, if I was going to go there and not do well, that was like a waste of money for me. I always felt that way about going to class too. Like, why am I going to skip class when my parents, myself, are paying for this? And that's kind of a waste of money to me. I always thought, and I tell people this all the time, that college to me was way easier than high school. You have so much more time to study. For me in high school, being a three-sport athlete, you're up early, you go to school, you go to practice. There's a limited time where you can get work done in the evening. In college, you have plenty of time. You might only have one or two classes in a day. You can choose to spend that time wisely, or you can choose to spend that time doing things that aren't going to help your grades. But you have to manage your time a lot better during the season than in the off season. Being in high school and learning those skills early that you can then take with you to college is huge. As far as, academic assistance and that kind of stuff, had a mandatory study hall for freshmen. We had to be there a few times a week. It was kind of one of those deals where if you proved that your grades were good enough, I think the second semester, it might have been our sophomore year, then we didn't have to go to study hall. If their GPA went below a certain number, then they were required to do that. And there were aides there to help with whatever we needed. I know a lot of programs today are a lot different than what it used to be when I played. I think kids today have a lot more academic assistance than what we did.
And during your time in college and as you're earning your degree, did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in education?
My dad, who was a teacher and a coach for 36 years, my brother first started teaching at William Penn, was there for a year, and then was at Gettysburg for a number of years. And so when I was in high school, my brother and my dad were teachers. And it was one of those things where I was like, I'm going to do something else. I don't want to do the same thing that those guys are doing. But I was a biology major. I was going to go to physical therapy school. I was doing an internship. And I was like, I don't think this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. After my senior year of football, I was in the football office, and Coach Twilliger, he was like, Granger, you got to be with us next year. And so, honestly, like waiting for those guys to be like, hey, do you want to still be a part of this? And I was like, heck yeah, I do. If you can find something that you do in your life that makes your hair stand up on your arm and gives you that feeling and goosebumps, and I think you're doing the right thing. That was something that happened for me, and it still does. And it's not even really necessarily on a Friday night. There's a lot of times on the practice field where you see a kid, he finally gets what you're coaching him to do, and it makes your hair stand up. After having that year of coaching at East Stroudsburg, I knew that I wanted to coach football. I had had some opportunities to coach different colleges. A buddy of mine, Aaron Brady, who he's been kind of all over the coaching circuit at different levels. And I remember him calling me because there was a Division II school. He's like, hey, they need a linebacker coach. They asked if I knew anybody, and I thought of you. And I was like, I just paid tuition for the summer and fall to go back and get my teaching degree. So it was one of those things where I wanted to make sure that I had that before I pursued anything else. I was able to take grad classes and get my teaching degree at the same time.
In 2002, you got a teaching position at Redline, but how did that opportunity to help coach at the football team work out?
I had applied for 2 positions at my alma mater and didn't get either of them. But one of my high school coaches at the time, George Shue, he was the head coach at Redline, and he got in touch with me and knew that I wasn't getting the job at Southwestern. So he's like, hey, love to have you. I'll never forget riding down to Redline the first time. And I'm in the car with George Shue, who is a Pennsylvania Hall of Fame football coach, Jack Connor, who is a Pennsylvania Hall of Fame football coach. And here I'm, some young kid in the back seat who's just starting out. You just kind of try to soak up what those guys know. Again, my high school football coach, Coach Seidenstricker, he's also in the Hall of Fame. Hopefully, I've been able to take a little bit from each one of them and pass on a lot of what those guys did for me to the guys that I'm coaching now.
And what would you say are the biggest differences between a position specific coaching job like you did? You started out as a linebackers coach and then transitioning to a defensive coordinator. What are those challenges that come along with that change?
I mean, I think if you're doing your job well as a position coach, you're doing a lot of film work on your own and you're relaying to the defensive coordinator what you see on film. And I think a lot of it is the same. It's just that you're not calling the plays on a Friday night. Now, I do think it depends on who you're working under and what school you're at and that kind of thing. But when I first got to Redline, our defensive coordinator was Fred Moyer. His ears were always open. And I was able to watch film and break down film and talk with him about, what I was seeing and give him some suggestions. And he was open to it. If you're doing a really good job as a position coach, you're doing a lot of the same things as the defensive coordinator or the offensive coordinator is doing. There's a great deal of responsibility that goes into being in charge of one side of the ball. And if you're not performing well on a Friday night, for me anyway, that weighs on me quite a bit.
And what would you say is your philosophy as a defensive guy? Like, how do you motivate your defenses to buy into your coaching styles and what you value?
A part of it is developing a really good relationship with your players. I'm not afraid to tell these guys that I love them. I get my linebacker core together before every game and I'll give them a hug and I'll tell them, hey, I love you. Have fun out there, right? Play hard. If those kids know that you are investing in their success and it is about them more than it is about you, they're going to be able to go out there and do the things that you're asking them to do. They spend a lot of time in the weight room and preparing and watching film. And that's a lot of time that they're spending off the field doing football stuff. If you don't have a great relationship with those kids, if they don't know that you do love them and you're there for them and their success, they're not going to work for you. They're not going to give everything that they have. And so I think that's the important thing first is developing that relationship with your players. You get to know them, you know what buttons to push sometimes. And you know that, hey, this guy over here, if I scream and yell at him, he's just going to crawl into a shell and he's not going to do well. But this guy over here, if I get in his ear a little bit, I know it's going to work. For me, I just kind of grew up with it. I mean, I was around it all the time, watching my dad, and Coach Seidenstricker is probably the best motivator there is. And you ask any of his players if they would run through a wall for him today, and 100% they would say yes. And so I just kind of been able to learn from a lot of really good coaches. And any defensive coach is going to tell you that they want their guys to play fast, get to the football in a bad mood. There's all the defensive cliches that you can throw out there, but I want those guys to know their assignments. So that's the smart part and with good fundamentals. And as staff at Redline, it's something that we try to concentrate on, being really good fundamentally and trying to play as fast as we can.
Now, being a coordinator since 2011, I'm curious to know, do you have any aspirations of potentially being a head coach at the high school or maybe even the collegiate level?
I get this question quite often. That's not something that I'm interested in. As a coach's son, I was able to really experience and witness a lot of really, really cool things. But I also saw some of the negative aspects of being in a family where the guy, is the head coach. That's just not something that I've ever felt that I would deal with very well. I really enjoy the X's and O's, and to be a position coach as well as a coordinator. If you're going to be a really good head coach, you have to concentrate on a lot of other things. I really enjoy being a coordinator. I really enjoy being a position coach because I think that is where you get to do the most coaching of the game of football.
And being with the program for almost 20 years now, how has Redline football stayed the same, but also changed with each class that comes through?
I've been able to now be a part of three different staffs, underneath Coach Shu, and I've been able to have the opportunity to work with a number of different coaches that have come on board and left. And the cool part about that is you get to develop a lot of really cool, long-lasting relationships. Obviously, there's going to be different philosophies, and your program is going to run a little different way according to who the head coach is, maybe scheme wise and that kind of thing. But I really think our core values that we have as people and what we're teaching the kids that we get are hardworking kids. They're good kids. We very rarely have to deal with any kind of behavior issues. That's something that is a testament to the kids that come through Redline High School, but also their parents as well.
And at the end of every season, when you're able to sit down and kind of reflect on what you just accomplished, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of coaching these young athletes?
Rewarding for me is just to see these guys be successful. On Mother's Day, I get a text message from one of our former players that was wishing my wife a happy Mother's Day and telling me that he can't wait to see me in the summer and catch up. That to me is rewarding. That those guys feel enough to reach out on a Mother's Day to wish my wife happy Mother's Day. They're wrapping up probably finals and their mind could be a million other places, but for them to do that, to me, that's rewarding. To see those guys become good husbands, good fathers, really good contributors to society, that's what we should be doing as football coaches.
And for this final question here, we like to end on an inspirational note. So, what is one piece of advice that you would like to share with any junior high or high school football player?
I'm just kind of thinking kind of where we are right now in the football year. A lot of kids right now that are probably in spring practice or they're going to be heading into spring practice. And a lot of that time is learning. The one little bit of advice I would have for them at this time of year is sometimes that kind of stuff in practice, if you're not like a real football guy and into the X's and O's, it can get a little boring, right? You might space off a little bit. But if you can get comfortable in those situations where you're really truly learning the X's and O's of whatever scheme your high school is running, you're going to be able to play faster. You're going to be able to play smarter. The more you know about your scheme and not just what your position is doing, but all the people around you so that you can communicate with them on the football field. One of the things that we do defensively, they constantly should be talking on the field, right? An outside linebacker is talking to a defensive end. He's talking to a corner. He's talking to a safety. He's talking to his other linebackers. There's constant communication. And so those are little things that you can work on in the spring that are going to make you become a really, really good defensive player. Not allowing yourself to kind of space off or goof around or whatever. You're a young guy just learning the stuff. Concentrate, dive into it, and really learn those schemes because you're going to be able to play faster. And the other thing is just to enjoy it while it's here. And I know some other coaches have probably said the same thing to you, but our sport is a little different than some other sports. If I want to go play pickup basketball tomorrow, I can do it. I can go grab a tennis racket and I can play tennis or racquetball or whatever. I'm not going to be able to grab a helmet and put shoulder pads on and play anymore. Our window to play this game and play it well is really short. For most people that play it, it's the 4 years that or 3 years that you have in high school. It seems like a really long time when you're in it, but man, it goes by so fast. And so take advantage of just the opportunity that is there for you to play football on a Friday night in front of your home crowd under the lights. There's nothing like it. And there might not be other times in your life where you actually get that feeling. You're going to get it when your kids are born. You're going to get it the day you're married. But every Friday night in the fall, that is a huge opportunity, and you can't let it go by without at some point being able to, in the moment, be like, man, I'm pretty lucky right now.
Well, I'd like to thank you for speaking with me today and talking a little about your football background. So I think our viewers will really appreciate this talk and can probably take a lot out of it. So
Thank you so much, Emily. And hey, congratulations. I know you're graduating on Saturday. So
I am graduating on Saturday. Thank you very much. I appreciate
yeah,
it.
take care.
You too.